Welcome to our webcast on AI and education in low resource environments. Everyone in the Pratham family thanks you for joining today. My name is Sheila Gulati. I've worked as a volunteer for Pratham for 15 years, and I've never been so excited for what we can accomplish. Pratham's mission is every child in school and learning well. And for 27 years, Pratham has tirelessly worked to make this a reality in India, and now is expanding to help other countries scale their education efforts. The thing about driving education in India is to make a difference, you need to manage this work at scale. Pratham focuses on high quality, low cost, and replicable interventions to address gaps in the education system, working directly with children and teachers, as well as through large-scale collaborations with government systems. Pratham reaches 5 million students each year, 5 million students each year in India through their programs. And now the organization is expanding those learning methodologies and also how they measure education outcomes to more than 20 other countries around the world. Now, why are we here today? With the improvements that we've seen in artificial intelligence, a new dawn is emerging for education. Pratham is an organization that tackles problems that some would call impossible. The innovations that we are seeing now in AI allow us to tackle the seemingly impossible scale of transforming education at this incredible scale for every student. And it allows us to see a brighter future with first-class educational resources for every child, moving us closer to that definition of a good society that includes a top-tier education for every child. So each of you on this call, I'm guessing, got a true leg up in life through your education. And we wanted to kick this off with just a thank you to all of you for coming today to learn about AI in education and how we can together transform the world. So we have a great group of speakers for you today. They're true AI experts with incredible depth. And our experts are so excited to tackle your questions. I'll introduce them, but we're putting their long-form bios in the chat as we introduce them as well. So please welcome Sumit Chauhan. You know, Sumit runs all of these office applications that you use. It's now all together called Microsoft 365. But it's Word and PowerPoint, and she's also building new creative solutions with platforms such as Stream and Clipchamp. Sumit's been at Microsoft for over 26 years, and she runs the super cool Copilot stuff that you've heard about, and we're gonna have her explain more of what that is. Initiative that Microsoft is driving, where each of us gets a co-pilot to help with our productivity. Srinivas Narayanan, he's the VP of Engineering at OpenAI. OpenAI has been in the news a little bit these days. I'm sure you've heard about it. He's so excited about how to make AI useful to all of humanity. So he's very excited for this conversation. And before OpenAI, he was a VP of Engineering at Facebook Meta, where he worked for 13 years. We're also thrilled to have Devindra Chainani on the line. He's the co-president of Pratham Seattle. He has over 30 years of experience at Microsoft. He's in the process of taking a very exciting new job at the nexus of how AI chips and software interact together. And we're so lucky to have these wonderful speakers with us today. So what we'd like for all of you to do is we'll start with a few questions, but please type your questions into the chat. We will try to cover all of them in this session, and we'll read them out as they come in. So let's start with an open-ended question that I'll ask each of our panelists to answer, and Sumit, we'll go to you first. Why is education important to you? Give us your vision of an AI-enabled future for education in low-resource environments. And in what specific ways can AI be leveraged to enhance learning outcomes? Over to you.
It's wonderful, Sheila. First of all, it's wonderful being here. I'm a huge supporter and advocate for Pratham, and I'm delighted to be here. Yeah. There's quite a bit packed in your question, and if I may start with, look, education is the foundation to economic growth, economic freedom, help uplift societies, all of that goodness. And particularly when it comes to, educational inequity, I do believe AI and education can play a significant role in bridging that gap. And when you think about lack of quality education, there are a number of factors at play, and it starts with quality of teachers that we have, quality of learning curriculum, or overcrowded classrooms, and the list goes on and on. And AI as a tool can come to rescue or can come to benefit in all of these areas and help uplift all of these objectives. And when it comes to sort of the overarching vision for AI and where AI is headed, and Srinivas is here too, and in terms of what's happening in the frontier of AI, where the future is in sort of this personal assistant or personal agents helping you through all aspects of your life. And education is a huge aspect of our lives. And what is the role an agent, a personalized learning tutor, assistant can play in achieving your learning outcomes? And so, I'm glad we are having the discussion, and I know it's a very sort of a controversial topic right now on AI and education, and we've been in various discussions around that. But I'm very, very bullish and optimistic that the future with AI looks extremely bright. Whether when it comes to, like I said, let's look at teachers, for example, quality of teacher training. Whether it's real-time feedback that teachers have had, post classroom feedback that teachers get, the simulation that they can get towards their own learning, how can they become lifelong learners and stay up to date and abreast with everything that's happening in their field. So much to contribute in that spectrum. Then when it comes to the students, AI can play such a huge role in helping create an adaptive curriculum for every person. Every person we know learns at a different pace, have unique strengths and opportunities to as far as learning goes. And so AI can play a huge role in building an adaptive, personalized learning for everybody, and especially when it comes to developing the underserved communities. I do think AI, AI particularly where we don't have access to good teachers, etc. An AI agent or an AI tutor could play a huge role in bridging that gap. Or even when it comes to creating curriculum, and the list goes on. It's such a rich wide topic, but lots and lots to do here in the future for sure.
Amazing, and lots to unpack. Srinivas, will you give us your vision?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. I've been involved with Pratham for a long time, and education is something very dear to my heart. We've been supporters of Pratham for a very long time too, and I couldn't be more excited to actually bring more of my professional work to impact this area, like where I focus on AI. I've been working in this field for a while. And it's just incredible for me to see how AI is being used now to actually change education. We're obviously in the very early stages, but some of the interesting stuff people are working on gives me a lot of joy. So my vision, if I look at it, I think I want education to be personalized, adaptive, interactive, and inclusive. Right. So if you sort of really dig into what each of these means, personalized basically is obvious. We want technology to meet where people are, not people to go where technology is. Right. And it needs to be, the learning should be customized to sort of where I am at any point in my life. And how do I go from where I am to the next stage? And technology and AI can be a great tool to personalize education for people. Adaptive is, again, meeting people where people are, right? And so helping you, guide you along the way, adapt to where your needs are, not just your learning needs, but learning is also an emotional problem. Like people have struggled with confidence, right? And so I think they're afraid to ask questions. And we want to solve all these sort of more, I would say, subjective problems, not just sort of the objective, here is sort of like what technology or whatever you are trying to learn is, right? So how AI, I think, can be a great emotional companion for you to sort of give you confidence or give you a nudge when we all need that. So I think the adaptive part really comes in the way. Interactive, I think doing is fantastic. You learn a lot by doing. And I think AI will provide us amazing tools to make learning interactive, right? Whether it's conversational, whether it's actually virtual reality where you can sort of engage in simulations or playing with things. And I think there'll be amazing opportunities for us to learn sort of in an interactive ways. And the last piece, which is very, very relevant for our conversation today, is the inclusive piece, right? Which is technology. Hopefully, we can democratize this and make this available to everybody in the world, not just independent of where you are. And so I really would like that to happen. And I think we have sort of some of the seeds of it. And of course, there's a lot of challenges ahead, but that's the world, I would love to be able to create and be part of.
And on that note, Srinivas, question for you from the chat. GPT models have become better as they've become bigger. What is your perspective on the feasibility of getting similar results with similar models in low resource environments?
Yeah. I think it's a solvable problem. I think it's a question of focus. I think we have generally seen two things, right? The models get better with more compute and more data. And low resources is challenging because the data problem is harder in those regimes. We generally have more, content in English than in many other languages. But we've also seen really interesting AI techniques prove out, which is this idea of sort of multilinguality and cross-language transfer. So the fact that, us able to train models in a set of languages, actually training in one language tends to improve performance in another language. More so in closely related languages, but even less so in like other languages. So I'm optimistic. I mean, I think it is going to be harder for this to make this work, but I'm actually optimistic just given these two trends that we will get increasingly better in low resource languages as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Devindra, let's hear your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. I just wanted to share some of the context on the ground in the low resource environment. In my role with Pratham, give you some statistics so India's been doing really well in getting enrollment up. And enrollment doesn't equate to attendance, and attendance doesn't equate to learning well. So kudos to the government and the community and the parents and the kids themselves. The enrollment is now close to 98%. 98% of the kids eligible for school are enrolled in school. Attendance is around 70%. And when it comes to learning well, that's about 30 to 40 to 50% at the max. So we have a wonderful report at Pratham called ASER, the Annual Status of Education Report, which measures whether kids at age 10 can do basic division, basic reading. And only 3 or 4 kids out of 10 could do that. Right? So the mission over here and the vision is that every child in school learning well. And if you know that one of the most effective ways of learning is the Socratic method of learning, where if a personal tutor has a conversation with a child, you can bring out the best from the child, right? So Socrates was Plato's tutor. Plato was Aristotle's tutor. Aristotle was Alexander the Great's tutor, right? So the vision over here is now with AI, every child can have a Socratic personalized tutor, and every teacher can have a personalized teaching assistant. That's the mission. And I just want to paint this scenario. Imagine a dusty classroom in a hot neighborhood in India. I know about India, but there are low resource environments everywhere in Kenya, Nigeria, various parts of the world, right? There's one teacher with a blackboard, 40 to 50 kids in that classroom sitting on the floor. The wireless penetration density is around 40 to 50%, which means about 40 to 50% of the rural population has a cell phone accessible to them. Only 6 out of 100 of these kids have a dedicated cell phone or dedicated access to a smartphone. So when we think of these solutions of a personalized tutor and a personalized teaching assistant in a low resource environment, therein lies the challenge. And the mission is, can we make AI accessible to that kind of an environment?
And those are the most of the questions coming in on the chat are specific to that. So why don't we start double clicking into the specific, tools, platforms, applications from a software perspective that are particularly well suited for low resource environments. But then the two part of the question is, how are we getting this access to students? What are we doing with it? Where does that access come from? And of course, that's a broader question of device and brings in hardware into the conversation as well. So Srinivas, do you want to kick this one off?
Sure. Could you just mind maybe making it specific? Like what specifically would you like me to address?
Specifically, software solutions from an AI perspective that are very well suited to low resource environments.
Yeah.
So like, how do we get the software? And then how do we get it into people's hands? Like what are the techniques? How do you think about getting it into the hands of kids and teachers?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I would say the current sort of technology, especially with ChatGPT and tools like that, makes it very convenient for us to just access this through just a mobile device, right? It's a very simple text interface. You can ask questions and it gives you answers. So you don't need complicated hardware or new devices. Like most teachers probably, at least hopefully, have a phone, right? Students, I think, in low resource languages is a challenge. So I think, we sort of have to be thoughtful there. But if you have a reasonable phone, I think you have access to the technology. Now, there are other challenges. There is cost. There's other things. I'll kind of come to that in a second. But one of the hope I have is that the teachers actually do struggle with teaching large numbers of people, and AI can be a fantastic tool in scaling them up, right? So it can help them do their work more efficiently. It can help them answer questions that they might be struggling with. And it really just sort of democratizes access to this technology. So I think like the current technology, like I said, is already accessible and hopefully will be driving benefit to a lot of people already.
Sumit, can you speak a little bit? We're getting a number of questions around, are students going to have a personal tutor, right? And maybe you can speak about this vision for this at the student level, but also at the teacher level, right?
Yeah.
Co-pilots, pilots. Speak to us a little bit about that and maybe even define the term.
Yeah. Look, I mean, at Microsoft, we've been on this journey for a while. We launched this GitHub Copilot with the idea of assisting developers in their coding technology. And, one of the aim with this whole idea of Copilot, whether it's M365 Copilot, bringing it to Office, and the term is really about giving everybody an assistant for their entire life, not just a part of their life. And we started on the journey. But when it comes to education, I do believe that the future probably, in the future, the kids will be growing up with their personalized tutor. Learning doesn't stop. I think, Devindra, you were saying it. You just gave some statistics on kids are enrolled. Kids are even going to the classrooms, but the learning that they're getting out of this environment is not that great. The numbers are not that great. And why is that? And I think the number one reason, like I said, is the quality of curriculum, the quality of teachers, the quality of educational materials. And so all of that, I think you can address through AI and a personal co-pilot. And just the access to information, and Srini, you touched upon it, the interface through which you can access feels far more safer, far more less fear of judgment, far more adaptive, far more conducive to the way you learn or the pace at which you are going. And all of this makes learning, so that learning hump a lot more personalized and tailored to you. And even when it comes to teachers, one of the huge challenges we have in some of these low resource environments is mass training of teachers. How do you get good quality training out? And teachers today struggle getting personalized feedback. How did they do in a class? What was the real-time feedback? What questions spark discussions in a class? What happens post-learning? How many students participated? What were the kind of questions that triggered good discussions? What it's almost to someone made the point, I think Devindra made the point, is the Socratic sort of guide that you have with you all the time. And I'll give you an example. I was in India, in Lucknow, for Pratham a while back, and I went to a village and I saw the students, on a single iPad in a peer learning environment, passing the iPad around and learning. And, so this peer-based learning, the idea that you learn more with your peers or coach or mentor or guide, and making that even more scalable and accessible with AI. I do think that's the future where learning is headed. And I'm bullish about the democratization of it at scale. Thanks to the work that OpenAI folks, et cetera, are doing, it's totally accessible to everybody at large. Now we have to address the cost point, and to the point, Srini, you made. I think the model costs are coming down. They should come down. Yes, they are computationally heavy, and they are data heavy, these models. But if you look at what's happening with some of the work in multimedia with visual models, et cetera, where we have been able to get them to run cheaper, faster, I hope we get there.
Thank you. That's a great vision. Devindra, this question is for you from Pratik in the chat. A child's biggest support are their guardians. In a recent CSF report, 75% of parents check in with their kids on what's happening in school, what homework they are doing. How can we work on improving the quality of parents' involvement in learning?
That's a great question, Pratik. So I want to, at this point, call out, this might seem like a setup, but it's a great point to call out the work that the Prodigy digital team, which is Pratham's digital team, has done for what they call the Mother's Bot. And parents, great resource, right? Especially moms at an early stage are influential teachers for their little kids. And for girl students, it's an even more severe problem because these girls don't attend schools in as large numbers as boys do for various reasons, right? So Nishant Bagel and his team have built this Mother's Bot, which is a WhatsApp-based interface which connects to GPT from OpenAI. And it allows a mom to ask a question using an audio prompt in a native language. And they worked with another team in India called AI for Bharat, which does this multilingual translation. And then the response is also back in an audio format in a native language. Mm-hmm. The data is provided by UNICEF, World Health Organization, various pediatric associates, various doctors. So it's trying to get rid of the hallucinations, right? And the goal over here is that moms will become the first teacher for the young student. As they grow older, and there are some depressing statistics on how girl students drop out at an alarming rate as they grow from primary school to middle school to senior school. So the enrollment for girls in middle school is about, in primary school is about 80 to 90%. In middle school, it falls to 70. Then by high school, it drops to 50%. 1 out of every 2 girl students drops out for various reasons. We won't go into that right now. If these girls were allowed to finish 10th grade, they'll have a great life ahead of them, right? So again, they can't go to the school for various reasons. The parents can help them finish the 10th grade. And if the parents are not educated, a low-cost AI assistant can help them finish their 10th grade, right? So great point, Pratik. I think the wireless phone penetration with parents is significantly higher than the wireless penetration phone with teachers. And if we target the parents first, I think we'll make significant inroads.
That also speaks to the point of access and how kids get access to these things. Srinivas, question for you. How do I reliably reduce hallucinations in a domain as broad as education?
Yeah, it's a great question. We are working on it. It is a very open-ended problem. So I wouldn't say I will have a perfect answer for them, but what I would observe is that the hallucinations will decrease over time. I think we have kind of well-known techniques to sort of bring it down. I think completely eliminating it is an unknown sort of, we don't know how to do it yet, but I'm fairly confident that the amount of hallucinations will decrease quite a bit. And that's just like through known techniques, right? Like, so we can get better models that react to this. There's also other techniques on sort of using retrieval and other sort of, I'm getting into more technical territory here, but there's other set of techniques that will ground these models to create more factual information. So we're working on a whole bunch of them. And I think, yeah, we'll get substantially better over time. It is, I would caveat it, say it is something to be aware of. Like, this is not like everything is like fantastic and let's just go and embrace this and not worry about it. Like, you kind of have to adopt this with caution right now, and you have to be careful and not take it at blind faith on what these models do. They do make up stuff sometimes. So I do worry about that in the education use case. So I think like viewing this with some sort of skepticism is important. But it has been incredibly useful in general, right? And I think there is a class of problems where you can approximate answers are actually good, and you can, when you read it, whether it's good or not. I think those are very, very clear use cases where you can already deploy this. And there are also classes of problems where we can verify the output of the model. And when you can verify the output of the model, it actually becomes very easy to know whether what they're saying is correct or not. So there are clearly classes of problems where we know that these solutions are tractable. And then there's obviously a class in the middle where the hallucination is a problem today, but we know ways in which to reduce that over time.
Thank you. Question for you, Sumit. This comes in from Nermit on the chat. High-speed internet access took multiple decades to be generally available and is still elusive to impoverished parts of the world. This digital access disparity has created a generation that's extremely divided and continues to grow apart. AI access and availability can help bridge the gap efficiently. What steps can AI tech giants take to narrow the divide, starting with our young kids?
It's a great question, and I think we briefly touched upon it. How to make today, the digital divide is real. And as I was explaining, I was sharing with you guys my story of having visited this community in Lucknow with a device, where the kids were sort of learning on the shared device, gives me a lot of hope in the sense that, AI, eventually the diffusion of this technology is happening at a very rapid pace. There's no question about this. I'll give you another example where, I was in India recently, and these guys were sharing with me this tech where a farmer in a village, because of all the digitization of that's happened in India, the digitization of all government products, he became aware of some farmer subsidy that was available. And, using his mobile phone, he was able to, he wanted to download the form, fill it up, and apply for this subsidy. And he was able to do it, even though he had lacked formal education, did not understand how to read or write, fill out the form, but using voice tech and using an AI solution, he was able to apply for the subsidy, get the grant, and go on, right? And so if you take some of those examples where diffusion of tech is happening at a rapid pace. People are well connected with mobile in all parts of the world. The challenge, I think you're correctly pointing out, what is the role that I think the question was, what is the role big tech can play in making this even more accessible, and connectivity that continues to be a challenge. And I think there is a role certainly big tech can play. And that said, the rate at which the world is getting connected and is connected already gives me a lot of hope that there is, it's not too far out in the future.
Thank you. Vish asks, do you continue to see schools as the central hub for education in the medium-term future? Will accessible AI tutors change this equation? Should they? Whichever panelist wants to take it first.
Yeah, it's a good speculative question. Like, what's the future of learning? Is the future of learning in a closed classroom with a teacher and a bunch of students, or is it a self-paced guided learning using virtual tutors and a virtual school environment? And as you look at the trend even in learning, as learning is becoming online, learning is becoming more distributed, learning is happening more through visual mediums, YouTube instructions and so on and so forth. You sort of draw the line and extrapolate, and given where AI is headed, does learning actually become completely personalized, right? And without guided sort of classroom-like experience? And even what does learning look like in the future? I even question that, right? I mean, we all grew up with a learning which was very rote-based because information wasn't easily accessible. You know, a lot of memory had to be contained here in order for critical thinking and synthesis. But with the explosion of knowledge being accessible to everybody, and also, you know, as I'll give you the calculator example. You know, when the calculator came into our lives, long form computation became really easy. It still didn't take away from the fact that students had to understand, you know, work from first principles. They still had to have basic mathematical computation understood. I think something similar might happen in the space of generative AI or writing, where, you know, students still need to understand sentence structure, but do they really need to when they're writing an essay, do they really need you know, do they really need to write it all, or can they use AI to assist them? And what role does you know, what is the role that humans play in this kind of learning environment? Is it more on critical thinking? It's more on critical understanding rather than, you know, synthesis and generation of content and knowledge. And so I think a lot of things are up in the air with how learning changes and the systems and structures around learning change.
Devindra, can you take us forward on that with respect to educators, teachers? So 2 questions on this. What is your advice to educators on skills they should acquire to be successful in 5 years from now? That's from Sumit. And from Nag, how do you see the role of teacher shift with AI transforming education in low resource environments?
Yeah. So just to add to the previous question and building on what Sumit also said and what skills teachers need to acquire, schools are not going away. Teachers are not going away. The roles will evolve. Schools will become collaboration hubs. Teachers will become coaches. Students will become explorers, and there will be AI assistants. And the role of the teacher will move from being the sage on stage to a guide on the side. I love that phrase. That's a decades-old phrase that somebody from MIT told me about. But, you know, the skills that teachers need to acquire going forward are how to become good coaches. And unfortunately, a teacher's time is so taken up in lesson prep, grading, bureaucracy, that if AI can reclaim some of the time that these teachers spend wasting in bureaucracy or lesson prep or lesson grading, then they can have meaningful one-on-one interactions with every child. So the number one skill that teachers will have to acquire, educators have to acquire going forward, is how to build meaningful relationships with each child. Right? AI will become their assistant. It's a dystopian future where you think of a child in front of a screen and the child is learning just on that screen. No, that's not the future we envisage, right? The future we envisage is a warm, mentoring, nurturing, human teacher guiding a human child with AI as an assistant, right? In a collaboration space called the school, where you get to experience the joy and the friendship with other colleagues.
Love that vision. Srinivas, advice for the student now. Tell us what advice you would give to students, and you know, feel free to pick students with you know, in different resource environments, right? How would you tell students to engage with AI? How would you talk to them about the future? How would you coach them?
Yeah, I mean, for people who have access to this, first play with it. I think it's a fantastic tool. And really, like, I think this vision of a co-pilot or a personal assistant that can help you do what you're doing better is going to be great. And I think I would just try to engage with it as much as you can to help you do the things you're doing better. I think in a low resource language, I mean, it really depends on sort of access to the technology, but I think we need to find ways in which students can engage with teachers. Maybe they have some ways in which they can experience this themselves. Maybe if you're in a rural village in India, you don't have phones by yourself, but maybe teachers can share a glimpse of what's possible, right? And so that will hopefully inspire the kids to see the world out there. And it will see what's possible. And I think that will create lots of interesting opportunities for them to imagine the future. I think the fundamental skills of sort of like learning to learn is never going to go away. I think that's probably the most critical skill for any of us. It's honestly, I think it's very hard to predict the jobs of the future 10 years from now. None of us could have predicted the world we are living in 2023, even I would say 5 years ago, 3 years ago, right? Like these are sort of like fairly big step function changes that we are going through. And it's a little bit hard to predict the future, but I do believe fundamentally that humans like interacting with other humans. There will be a huge economy around sort of humans working with other humans, and those things are not going to go away. And one of the core skills you're going to have in that world is just sort of being ready for change and embracing change and picking fundamental skills that allow you to learn the things that actually matter in the new world, right? And that's hard, but I think that's the best advice I can give for anyone. Like just to give personal examples, I mean, AI wasn't a thing 20 years ago, right? Like I did a neural networks class in my undergrad in the 90s, but sort of dropped after that. Like it wasn't a real job. You couldn't get AI jobs in the late 90s or in the 2000s. And I just was interested, and I sort of moved back to this field when it became practical. And so I think people should embrace change and should be willing to sort of dive into whatever is most important to being economically productive in the future.
Thank you. A couple of questions are coming up on local languages, right? Mm-hmm. Specific to, and you can take the example specific to the Indian context. Obviously, that's generalizable to other contexts. Srinivas, do you want to start with us on a little bit of thoughts on that?
Yeah. Very important question, obviously. I think we have a few different thoughts here. One, a lot of the general models are pretty reasonable in many of the Indian languages, especially like things like Tamil, Hindi. I think they have a little bit more data, maybe than even lower resource languages, but they actually work somewhat reasonably well. Translation is a fantastic tool. We have pretty good translation for most of these languages these days from lots of different vendors. I think that will help bridge the gap in many languages. I also know of projects based in India. Project Bhashini is one that is building LLM specifically for Indian languages. I've been involved with them. And that is, I think, going to be fantastic. I think it's good to see sort of a lot of these different efforts that are trying to build AI in specific languages as well. Yeah.
And then maybe an add-on to that question. There's a number of questions around sort of the ethical issues that you might face with deploying AI models and training them on, different data that's being acquired from different means. Can you talk about kind of any of these implications and maybe safeguards that we could think about, especially for specific to low resource environments? Srinivas, I'll throw it to you first again.
Yeah, the topic of AI safety is pretty broad, right? And we take it pretty seriously. It's a very core part of our mission. We want this to be broadly useful for humanity. We are trying to prevent abuse. And as we have talked about publicly, we red team our GPT-4 models for 6 months before we even launched it, right? So it is sort of a very important thing that we take seriously, and we continue to improve these models on safety dimensions. I think, sorry, there was an earlier question you had around safety. Can you, maybe I missed it. Sorry, can you repeat that?
It's both. How do you get to further safety, and what are the ethical implications that you're considering in low resource environments?
Yeah. I mean, we have a framework for safety. We want this to be broadly applicable. We don't want these models to say things that are harmful to people. There is an entire category of harms that we work through, and then we train these models to be careful about responding to them. I do think the same issues apply for any environment, right? Whether it's low resource or not. And we need to pay more attention to these, and I think we will continue to do them over time. And yeah, that aspect of safety is pretty important.
Great. I like this question from Deep.
Oh, sorry, I missed the data part. Yeah, I think
go ahead.
This is what I was asking. I think there was a question of data and ethical use of data. Sorry. Yeah. I think Well, we're still sort of figuring out the economic model in this. I mean, I think there will be standards and regulations that will emerge here as well, which is, people should ultimately have control over their data. There might be standards that emerge that allow people to decide whether they want to contribute their data for AI training. We're probably in the early stages of that. We also have to evolve our economic models, right? So there has to be incentives for people to contribute their data back to the training. So if you're using them and we are producing results from it, we can find some ways to share the economic structures, revenues back with the producers. We are experimenting with a few of these. I'm not going to say we have figured this out. We're absolutely working on them, though.
A lot of moving pieces, but a lot of activity. Devindra, this one is for you. I like this question from Deepti. She asks, if access to a smartphone is the first step in an AI-powered education, maybe what's the second step? Is teacher training the second step? But what are the steps after that? So can you paint more of a step-by-step picture of how this works in an actual application or solution?
Yeah, that's a great question, Deepti. So it's a multi-pronged solution, and technology is never the only solution, right? So in this case, especially in a bureaucratic environment, in a complex environment like India or other low-resource environments, socioeconomic, government, community involvement is more critical than just technology, right? So just for technology, the steps would be, yes, I need access to a phone, a smart device. Then I need internet access. And one of the biggest problems these kids and teachers have is that they keep running out of their internet time. They buy some internet time and then they run out of it, right? So there are some companies in India who have launched a very affordable phone and a very affordable plan, but you have to keep replenishing the internet access, right? So that's another big step, that please give me continued access. Then the deployment, and then the actual dissemination, and then working with local panchayats and local bureaucrats and local communities to make sure that this is not some foreign agenda being foisted onto them through these devices, that there isn't some evil plan, grand plan for some foreign government coming into their kids, right? So there's a lot of socioeconomic and local convincing that needs to be done in terms of this. So that's why we are going to encourage that everybody on this call who will are watching the live call and the recorded call, please can we treat this like an ideathon, right? An open-ended ideathon where we'd love to get your ideas from everybody, not just people who are into technology, people who are doing humanities majors. We need your ideas on how to get these solutions out into the hands of the rural population, because without a good socioeconomic government community structure, nothing's going to work.
Connected to that, a couple questions have come in around, Devindra, your comment on your Socratic AI tutor, right? The goal of learning is to help students critique, think, be creative, right? Are those goals realistic? Another add-on question to that, how do we address the problem that AI tools like ChatGPT might make kids sort of lazier than the critical thinking that they were doing before? How do we rethink these questions in education on what's the purpose of the education? What's the depth of thinking that we're asking students to go into? How do you think about it?
I have a question for Srinivas over here. So Khan Academy is building an AI tutor called Khanmigo, right? Yeah. And Sal Khan said that he worked with the OpenAI folks to say, hey, don't provide the answer. Can ChatGPT or GPT think out loud? So if a child says, hey, take a common math problem. I'm going to multiply a number with everything inside a parenthesis, right? And usually children just multiply just the first term inside the parenthesis, and then they get the answer wrong. So instead of just providing the answer, can the model say, what were you thinking? And then prod and ask questions from the child and lead them to the answer. Please don't provide the answer. So I don't know what he meant by that, Srinivas. Can you elaborate on that, what that might be?
Yeah, absolutely. These tools that the ChatGPT and these AI tools that we have are like super powerful. And I think, you can sort of guide them and coach them to kind of get what you want. Like in some cases, you can ask them for the answer and they'll spit out an answer. In some cases, I don't want the answer. I just want you to tell me or guide me step by step on how I might want to create an answer, right? And that's the latter is what Khan Academy is talking about, Sal Khan is talking about, is sort of like, how do we kind of go guide these AI models to not reveal the answer, but to encourage the students to sort of arrive at their answers themselves, but by providing hints along the way. So it's a fantastic point. And I think I would definitely expect a lot of these new sort of AI tools. And I know friends who are building applications in this using on top of our APIs who are taking that approach, right? Which is don't give the answer. I want to kind of give you hints and coach you along the way. I think that's one. I think going back to the point and the larger question is, I do think our education curriculum and how we assess people will need to evolve. Like, I'm not going to like get around, dance around the bush, right? Like, if you're going to continue to, the world has changed. And we have adapted though in the past, right? Like, we have adapted the world to whatever tools have been used. We've had calculators, we've had search engines, and our education curriculum has adapted to these and figured out how to let students use them, but also find a way to like let them assist them in whatever they're doing. I view AI as sort of another step in the same direction, maybe a bigger step than some of the ones before, but our curriculum and our education system will evolve to sort of figure out how we can be beneficial for learning. And the kinds of things we assess will have to change and will have to evolve along with that.
Any applications that you folks on this call are interested in building an app in for this environment, right? For this challenge, any applications that you wish existed? Any of you?
I can go. I mean, I have one of my dream applications I wanted to build for a long time. And actually, it's doable now. And I see these people doing this in other languages. So I think one of the big two applications, I'll start with one. Language and math and science are sort of like two things close to my heart. I think many people in India who don't speak English sort of get left out of society, right? Like they just don't access to a whole bunch of jobs. And learning a new language, I think, can be fundamentally very different in this world. Like, so we have the technology to help people learn a new language. It can be super personalized. It can meet you where you are. It can help you translate your dialect and your accent of whatever mother tongue yours is, whether it's Hindi or Marathi or Tamil, and understand your sort of rural dialects, meet you where you are, help you speak better, give you the confidence to speak better. I think learning a new language is often about confidence, and people are very hesitant to, maybe we are very shy about sort of doing this, right? And I've personally experienced this in many ways. So I think we have an amazing tool in our hand to help people learn a new language. And the same thing goes for fundamentals in math and science as well. So this idea of a personalized tutor for learning language is, I think, one very dear to my heart.
Yeah, I would love one of the challenges with learning in a school-based in a disconnected environment is, you go into a classroom, you learn, you come out, you start afresh. There's no sort of continuum of your learning that carries through, in a sense that there is, a memory, a history of what I'm learning and how I learned. And having an AI, I would love to have an AI assistant or tutor for kids that kind of remembers their learning path and their learning journey, and then adapts to say, hey, this is what you learned so far. I think this could be next step for you, or this might be the next challenge for you, or this might be the next direction for you, right? Sort of a adaptive guided tutor or assistance. And I think with AI, we have that opportunity to do that, right? A long-term tutor that has a long-term memory of your learning and it doesn't disappear class to class, learning doesn't disappear from class to class, but you know what I mean? Like it's a very
stylistic
connected. Yeah.
One way I would say this is also that, we now have AI that is really amazing at taking a goal and creating a series of steps to achieve the goal, whether it's a chess game, whether it's a Go game. We have proven these things in those environments. I want this AI my goal is to learn English, or my goal is to learn algebra, or my goal is to learn calculus, or whatever that is. Take that and break it down for me, like make it like a step that I want to take. Like we have the technology, actually. I think it's like, how do we put this to use in these sort of contexts that it hasn't been put to use for so far? And I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for entrepreneurs and other people building this to do these sorts of applications now.
And just to one more build, Rukmini Banerjee, who's the CEO of Pratham Education Foundation, talks about this a lot. The adherence to curriculum is such a liability. And teachers in low resource environments have to complete a certain preset curriculum, right? And to build on Sumit's point, that doesn't allow them to meet the student where they are. And the system evolved because of a bureaucratic system from the colonial times, of the industrial age, which now caters just to the first two benches. It's like there are 7 more benches in the classroom with students on that who just get left behind. And because the system couldn't meet them where they are, and the teacher has to be confined to a rigid curriculum. So also to build on Srinivas's point, which is grading is based on that curriculum. If I'm going to grade you based on where you are, what you've learned, every child learning well, not just a question of check boxes, it's going to not just impact how the children learn, but it'll impact the entire educational system.
Incredibly important. Why don't we end with some closing comments from each of you? Great. What's your why for working on education? What's your why for working with Pratham? What's your why for bringing your long career in tech to this conversation? Sumit, why don't you start for us?
Yeah, when I first started working with Pratham, I did not know what I was in for, right? And like I told you about my journey of visiting Pratham in action, and it blew my mind away in terms of the impact the organization was having. And, I've been involved in various sort of organizations along the way, but the fact that they are actually making a difference, they are trying to attack learning and education in a way that is very innovative, very creative. And even this dialogue that we're having on AI and education and taking it head on and saying, how can we, bridge the divide and inequity in education? It's huge. And I mean, look, education is the means to economic freedom and economic independence. And especially when it comes to low resource environment, and particularly a country like India, I think that's the way out. So I'm deeply passionate and inspired by the folks on the ground in Pratham and the good work that they're doing. It's huge kudos.
Srinivas.
First of all, look, it's a privilege for me to be here. And the only reason I'm here talking to all of you is because my parents deeply believed in education. My mom never went to college. My dad got his college degree just for studying from home. But they believed in it so passionately that they sent me to the best school possible. And I'm deeply appreciative of everything they have done and what it has meant for me. And I just want I want a world in which ideally, everybody has access to what I had, right? And so I saw the personal impact it has had on me, and I hope that it's true for everybody in the world. So I think this is the only way I think we're going to make a better society.
Thank you. Devindra, please.
So just quick comment. My vision, of course, is not my vision, but the vision that I subscribe to is help teachers evolve from being sages on stages to guides on the sides. Give every teacher a personalized assistant. Give every child a Socratic style personalized tutor to bring out the best in the child. Don't provide the answers. Let the answers come from the children. But I want to ask you your vision, Sheila, because you're such an accomplished individual too. What's your vision? So
my why is I do think that education is a basic human right? It is an inalienable right for humans to have the right to education. And my why of working with Pratham has always been about the bold ambition, the scale. It's a scale problem. In the scale, it keeps repeating itself. And so how do we have something that can truly change the game? And so for me, I've worked with Pratham for a long, long time. I'm like over the moon excited about how much we can do leveraging and using this new world of AI to actually go and provide top tier education for every kid, change the game for teachers, change the game for parental understanding of how kids are learning. And I think that this is a discontinuity that can happen, but we have to start working on it now, right? AI has to be, hey, what's the good that we can do with AI in the world? And we have to start moving in that direction, because otherwise, frankly, all of these intractable problems that we talk about and we say, oh, it's such a shame we can't solve this. We have the tools, we have the magic now. So for me, we have to. I know Rukmini Banerjee, our fabulous CEO of Pratham, joined the call. I don't know if we can unmute her, but if we can, we should unmute her for the final word here. Let's see. She might be in a low resource environment. Rukmini, take it away.
We'll just have AI generate Rukmini's closing.
Well, we may not be able to. Oh, there she is.
It's a great conversation. I often feel, being a completely layperson, low resource environment, and my often colleagues say that I'm a dinosaur. This has been such an exciting conversation. I actually understood most of it. And that to me is great. And the four of you who are probably leaders in your field, spending your time and your effort thinking about the issues that we face is fabulous. So a huge big thanks to all of you for making your world accessible to us and being able to actually resonate with many of the issues that we face. So big thanks. And I'm going to circulate the recording to lots of people.
Well, thank you, Rukmini, for all the incredible work you do. Thank you to all the attendees who cared enough to show up and to stay and have this conversation. Thank you for all the fabulous questions. You will hear more from Pratham in the coming days about our efforts in generative AI and bringing AI into our different education environments. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sheila.
And most of all, thank you to our fabulous panelists. Thank you, Sumit. Thank you, Srinivas. Thank you, Devindra.
Thank you, Sheila. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.